Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about a profession that's going through a really fascinating transformation. You see, project management isn't just about ticking boxes anymore. It's growing up, it's evolving, and it's stepping up to meet some of the biggest challenges on a global scale. Okay, let's get into it.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the traditional way we viewed project success. Then, we'll track how that thinking evolved because, well, it had to. After that, we'll dig into a new framework called the P5 standard. And finally, we'll look at what it takes to be the kind of modern project manager who leads this charge.
All right, so to really get where we're going, we've got to look at where we've been. For decades, success in project management was all about a super simple, pretty rigid framework. The iron triangle. First up, time. The question here was, brutally simple. Did you finish the project by the deadline? It was a straight yes or no. Next, you have cost. Pretty straightforward, right? You had to stick to the budget. And coming in under budget, that wasn't just a nice to have. It was a major sign of how efficient you were as a manager. And rounding out the triangle, you have scope. Did you deliver exactly what you promised? No more, no less. Time, cost, scope. And for a long, long time, that was it. That was the whole game.
But, of course, the world doesn't stand still. And this neat little triangle, well, it started to show some serious cracks. People started asking bigger questions. I mean, you could have a project that was on time, on budget, and on scope, and it could still be a total failure. Why? Because it created no real value. Or even worse, because its negative impacts were just too high. The profession had to change.
And this quote, this really nails the turning point. The thinking shifted from just focusing on the project itself, that temporary effort, to the asset it creates. So it's not just about the construction phase anymore, it's about the whole life of the thing you've built and the value it keeps delivering long after the project team is gone.
You can actually see this evolution happen in a few distinct steps. First, you had basic compliance. That's our old friend, the iron triangle, maybe with a little quality thrown in. Then we moved into value creation. This is where we start adding things like risk and benefits and real long-term value to the mix. But the future, where we are right now, is all about the purpose-driven project. This is a whole new level, integrating social, environmental, and economic purpose right into the DNA of a project.
Okay, so if we're judging projects on all these new, bigger ideas, how on earth does a manager actually handle all that complexity? You need a new tool, a new framework, and that's exactly what the P5 standard is.
But before we dive into P5, let's just make sure we're on the same page with our definitions. So, what is a sustainable project? Well, according to the Green Project Management Standard, it's a project that's not just about building something new. It's also about actively trying to minimize the negative impacts, whether that's on the environment, society, or the economy, while still delivering the value you promised. It's this constant balancing act.
All right, so what is this P5 thing? It stands for 5 key pillars, and a really easy way to think about it is to split them into 2 groups. You've got the classic triple bottom line that you've probably heard of, people, planet, and prosperity, and then you have the 2 project management levers that make it all happen, process and products.
Now, what's really important to get here is that P5 isn't some rigid do this, then do that checklist. A much better analogy is to think of it like a periodic table for sustainability. It's brilliant, really. It gives project managers this huge menu of elements to think about, so they can look at a project's total impact and even link their work to massive global goals, like the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
So let's break that down a bit.
First, P5 asks you to look at the product, the thing you're actually building or delivering, and it asks you to look at it through 3 different lenses. First, people. What's the social impact? Then, planet. What's the environmental footprint? And finally, prosperity. How does it help the economy, not just for the company, but for the community around it?
Now, the other half of P5 is all about the process. And this is a huge deal, because what it's saying is that sustainability isn't just in the thing you build, it's in how you build it. So now you're looking at things like, are we behaving ethically? Are our staffing practices fair? Is the project site safe? Are we helping train local people? It's a much more holistic view.
So all of this, it brings us to the last and maybe the most critical piece of this whole puzzle. We've got a new definition of success, we've got a new framework to guide us, but who's the person that can actually pull all this off? What does this modern, sustainable project manager actually look like?
I love this quote because it just completely reframes the job. We're leaving behind the old idea of a project manager as just a person who checks off tasks. The modern PM is a strategic leader. They're an advocate for doing things the right way, they're an advisor on the real-world impact, and yeah, they're an architect of positive change. And to be that person, you need a certain set of skills. You have to be a change agent because you're pushing against how we've always done it. You have to be a systems thinker to see all the connections and the ripple effects that your project will have. And, of course, you've got to be an inclusive leader who is deeply ethical and who is willing to be held accountable for all the impacts of the project, the good and the bad.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the meaning of a successful project has just gotten so much bigger. We've gone on this journey, right? From the simple, ironclad rules of time, cost, and scope, to this much more complex, much more meaningful world of long-term value, real-world impact, and a true sense of purpose.
And so we'll leave you with this final thought. The experts are calling project managers the new architects of change. So with all these new tools and this new mindset, the question isn't just, what are you going to build? The real question is, how will your next project build a better world? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.